Hello, peoples and persons of all ages. It is I, Kazriam, and apologies because I'm feeling a bit under the weather, but something crazy happened to me when rewatching episode 8 of the Amazing Digital Circus for my Things You Missed video. There was one line from that episode that made something click for me, as if Kane grabbed me and shot the underlying secret of the show directly into my eyeballs. In my last video essay, I spent a ton of time praising the character development and charming aspects of the show, like its humor and animation. However, when it came to the plot and continuity in that video,
you're out, dumb.
While I still stand by that the outstanding characters and overall charm make the majority of the show great, I think it was fairly pointed out that many of you love the plot of the show and the extreme appeal that it offers. There are thousands of videos on YouTube alone deep diving into theories and headcanons that just to hand wave it off as a fun little bonus was diminutive of a major component of the show. However, like I said, there are already thousands of videos on YouTube covering countless theories, so I want to do something different. Something you haven't seen before. Something that among all the conversation about the what of the continuity, I want to dive into the why of the continuity. More specifically, why the continuity works in the Amazing Digital Circus and how it is a masterclass in how to write a compelling plot. It's no surprise that so many of you put your all-seeing eyes on the lore. The series has no mouth and yet it screams that things are not what they seem. With all this intrigue, it was only natural that questions would arise about the story and just how deep it goes. There are actually two things that set the storytelling of the Amazing Digital Circus a step ahead of the pack, but the first became clear to me after rewatching episode 8. So what was this insightful, simulation-shattering quote that helped inspire the basis of this video?
Alternatively, I don't got to explain diddly squat!
And while it seems just like a silly little joke of a line to reaffirm the position the characters find themselves in, it actually serves as the primary ethos behind the show's approach to storytelling. This isn't maybe a label you'd normally apply to the show, but when specifically focusing on continuity, the Amazing Digital Circus is in many ways a mystery. There is a tangible curiosity in gathering answers to some of the circus's biggest questions. If Kane created the circus, who created Kane? What is the void and what's really out there? What is this mysterious C&A logo everywhere? In addition to corn, is Jax afraid of grapes as well? These are some hard-hitting questions that we need answered, but the show says,
diddly squat!
The thing is, it's right. The show maintains a delicate balance that it must uphold in order to keep the audience entertained and properly informed to the important events and background of the series. This balance is the key to writing a good mystery, an elegant dance of the controlled release of information, giving just enough for a bunch of YouTubers to write some flashy headlines, but not too much that one type of video can overrule them all. Let's take an example that we already mostly have the answers to at this point, and is directly called out in the show, so there's little room for difference in interpretation. In episode 1, Kane says that the one thing that he doesn't have control over is their minds, and by episode 7, we get to learn that for sure Kane does in fact have the ability to add temporary modifiers. The thing is, if you backtrack that statement, you can see that we're already told this before it was even confirmed, and Jax calls this out too when crashing out. In episode 4, there's the stupid sauce, a seemingly innocent gag that causes a state of inebriation when you come in contact with it. In episode 5, Untitled, the gang votes to make Jax a vegan, causing Jax to remark that he thought that Kane couldn't manipulate their minds. Again, this is one of the most obvious cases because it's directly called out, but there are plenty of other examples all throughout the show that go unnoticed. Kinger being sane in darkness, for example. This is revealed in episode 3, and yet we get a hint of it in episode 1 and in episode 2, when he's very lucid and insightful during his conversation with Ragatha while the bucket is on his head. Both are perfect examples of how the show spreads out the release of key details, so that even if they seemed unimportant in the moment, they become essential later on. It also works to keep the audience engaged and encouraged to craft theories on their own, because they'll never know if a line or action may have been a hint at where the series is headed. Heck, there's only one episode of the show left, and there can still be dozens of theories that can be crafted regarding some of the unanswered questions. All this buzz about the mysteries of the show has led to a phenomenon of sorts. We have an insane amount of social media posts, fan art, and videos being produced about the show because, well, everyone's talking about it. It becomes a cycle where mystery is established, information is fed to a hungry audience, and people talk about the show more, boosting its popularity. As smart of an approach as this may seem, the thing is, it's also an obvious mechanic of mystery storytelling. The Amazing Digital Circus isn't the only show that writes with this in mind.
There are plenty of well-written pieces of media that balance out mystery in this way too, and yet I'd argue you're here and not on another video essay on a different show, so there is something quantifiably special about the Amazing Digital Circus compared to those other shows. And that brings us to the second thing I mentioned, where we circle back to the 3 C's and how the show masterfully weaves each in tandem with each other. As a reminder, the 3 C's, charm, the animation and humor, characterization, the character development and consistency in behaviors, and continuity, the plot development and world building, are often the most appealing when balanced equally. Go too hard into characterization and ignore charm, and you risk creating a boring episode. Go too hard into charm and ignore continuity, and you risk the episode feeling pointless and skippable. Yet, in my last video essay, I mainly focused on charm and characterization, so clearly those two are focused on the most, at least directly. This should cause an imbalance that drags down each episode, and yet this show is incredible. How is this possible? Well, it's because of what I'll dub the 3C weave, where an episode will allocate time directed at one of the 3 C's, but will be secretly using that time to bolster another one of the C's. To explain what I mean, I think the best example of this is episode 3. So how does this episode balance the 3 C's to maintain the appeal of the series so well? For characterization, we have a ton of examples, ranging from the cast bonding and discussing what happens when each of them hold their breath, and of course Pomni's growth and newfound appreciation following her heart-to-heart with Kinger at the end. Charm-wise, the episode offers a fun, spooky theme with some elements of horror, and of course excellent jokes throughout. But what about continuity? At least on the surface, there's not really much to be had. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, you could jump from episode 2 to 4, be told that Kinger is sane in darkness, and not lose too many important plot specifics. If the plot and continuity are such major components of the show, you'd figure that this episode is notoriously hated as a pretty fun, but ultimately pointless filler episode of the show. But I'd argue that episode 3 is an S-tier episode. One of the best the show's ever had. An episode that if someone started on it, they'd completely understand the appeal and want more. So what's going on here? It all comes down to the 3C weave. The entire charm of the spooky story they experience and the characterization of the heart-to-heart are both based on Kinger's trauma of losing his wife. This on the surface is an important character development and would most obviously be linked to characterization. But this development introduces an essential element of the plot going forward, meaning it's also tied to continuity. The episode effectively weaves the continuity into the characterization, which keeps its storyline thematically consistent while also creating a multivalent significance to its scenes. You may not know that on initial viewing, but that does mean that there's an extra layer of nuance that boosts the value of screen time for the audience. This extra layer ends up recontextualizing the scenes throughout the episode, and the episode itself gets even better as the show progresses. Gasp! An alert from my channel's analytic page at this hour? Oh no. Over 97% of you are not subscribed? YouTube will throw my videos out into the void! Quick! Please subscribe before the algorithm forces me to a fate worse than death! Becoming a kick streamer! Thank you to my lovely subscribers for keeping my videos 100% human-made.
And now, back to the show!
All of this is to say that the Amazing Digital Circus on an individual episode basis doesn't do a great job at making sure all 3 C's are perfectly balanced like many other great shows do, but it does do something special and unique, where it instead focuses its screen time developing engaging characters alongside some Kane-tier comedy writing, but setting the continuity as the core foundation of each of these comedic character-driven storylines. This allows a show that dedicates so much time to character exploration to also have incredible structure to its storytelling. In episode 4, we can spend most of the episode focused on Gangel's character development with tons of funny gags, and still get the important plot of the C&A callouts, Kane's mind manipulation, and Zubal's justified distrust of Kane with no screen time forced on exposition dumping to do it. This approach achieves the incredibly rare goal of pleasing casual and, let's say, dedicated fans of the series. This is the key to the show's widespread popularity. Far too often have I seen shows excel with one group, but lose out on the other. They can make plots too convoluted or time-consuming, where general audiences will miss key details entirely, or they can make the depth of the plot a metaphorical puddle, giving dedicated fans very little to work with. But by using that 3C weave alongside a disciplined informational philosophy, the Amazing Digital Circus gives dedicated fans the appropriate amount of pieces where they can feel smart for diving into and solving a part of the storyline early, and someone viewing it more casually can just enjoy the character-driven elements and be given the answers when the series decides it's time. As one of the greatest philosophers of our time put it, you get the best of both worlds. The only episode I'd argue is the exception to this approach, at least so far, is episode 8. There's some, but not nearly as much weaving between the 3 Cs. Instead, the episode just does the old-fashioned method and opts to balance out the 3 Cs extremely well. The traditional approach to any good piece of writing, which, shocker, still produces a really good episode. But overall, this structure is so good that it's become integral to the dynamic of the individual episodes. I say that because we see what happens when this approach isn't followed, and I think 2 episodes that didn't get the memo and suffered for it were episodes 1 and 7. Now, episode 1 can get a pass as it had a lot of things to introduce, and to be honest, a show with a first episode only half an hour long that knocked it out of the park on all fronts is fewer and further between than Gangle making it through a whole adventure with her comedy mask intact. Episode 7, however, isn't a bad episode, but it could have been better. One of the main comments I got from my last video was asking why I had the audacity to put it in the lowly B tier in my quick ranking. I said I wouldn't elaborate further, but I don't know, do you guys actually want me to review and rank each episode of the show? You don't have to tell me twice to gush about how great the writing of each episode is, so leave a comment if you'd actually want to watch something like that. Anyway, the reason why episode 7 in my mind was rated outside of A tier may not be what you expect, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to defend this episode. You may have expected my problem with this episode was the fake out of the escape the circus plot, but I actually think that's okay. That on its own, the idea of the characters legitimately having a path to leave the circus and seeing how each of them react to it is honestly a worthwhile character exploration, even if it was all fake. We see how adding this element of a mysterious new NPC disguised as a human starts to erode the trust built between the gang, ultimately culminating in the most intense scene of the show up until that point. Well, that all sounds really good, so what dragged this episode down to B tier? Something that I couldn't articulate until now, but it's because of those 2 things I've been praising throughout this video. The violation of the foundational information philosophy of the show, and the 3C weave, or lack thereof, in this episode. Going off of the latter, unlike other episodes in the Amazing Digital Circus, this episode especially feels like it's broken up into 3 distinct acts: the fun-filled and charming beginning, the lore-heavy continuity middle, and the characterization-focused erosion of trust ending. This isn't to say that each of these sections are completely isolated to that 1C. There certainly are some fun bits in the middle with Jackson Kane, character developments at the beach, and so on and so forth. But whereas episode 8 did this and balanced the 3Cs pretty evenly, episode 7 goes far heavier into continuity than the other 2, which breaks up a flow in this episode that feels so much smoother with the others. The shifts between these acts aren't jarring in themselves, but they are noticeable segmentations that make for individually good sections, but ultimately a thematically disconnected whole of an episode. If you disagree with my placement of the B tier, I completely understand if you think it deserved A tier, and in no way I'm saying you're wrong for holding that opinion. But most of you who disagreed and gave a reason usually said that the ending was amazing. And yes, it absolutely was, but I'm considering the whole of the episode. I had to knock it to B tier for that reason, because I just feel like it could have been stronger had they interweaved a consistent and prominent theme throughout all 3 acts, making it feel much more balanced and connected. I think trust was a perfect fit that was very present in the ending, less so but there in the middle, and absent in the beginning. And I mean trust between the human characters. The Charlie Fish joke is funny, but it doesn't count. I do want to mention that it's much easier to critique a story than it is to make one in the first place, so I don't usually like doing this, but if you were to ask me how I would broadly rewrite this episode, here's what I would have done. I would have had the beginning implement some sort of trust-based game like Falls or Marco Polo with at least one person cheating, had the middle with less exposition, and more Abel quietly sowing doubt and distrust between every member of the circus, not just Kinger, maybe mentioning that not all the cryopods are still online and it'll result in some of the gang dying, and kept the ending more or less the same, but this time the exit room has more arguing between each other as they all question each other's motives and disagree on how to proceed. Jax would still hit the button and everything else would be the same, so you'd still get that fantastic ending, but with a consistent theme emphasized throughout the episode that leads to an even more intense ending than we ended up getting. Now, I've been going on about the 3 C's, but I've also mentioned another issue of the violation of this mystery philosophy of the show, and I think we can boil that issue down to a single exchange between the characters. I'm of course talking about the Chinese room scene. Yes, the whole thing is an adventure, so it's mostly untrue, but a not insignificant amount of runtime is dedicated to exposition dumping. And yeah, it may have been a meta pushback on fans demanding answers before the show was ready to reveal them, but there was still something that felt inherently wrong with this scene. I may not have understood why it bugged me so much my first few times watching it, but once again, episode 8 gave me the epiphany I needed. In that episode, there is yet another exposition dump scene at the cafe, but unlike episode 7's Chinese room, this one works. But both involve a single character spelling out the answers to the rest of the cast and ultimately culminate in the gang pursuing a plan to escape the situation they're stuck in. So why does the cafe scene feel like the clearly superior approach to revealing answers that help solve this amazing digital mystery? It's because episode 7 gives the characters the answers because they deserve it, but episode 8 gives the characters the answers because they've earned it. All of the answers we're given in episode 7 comes from a character we don't know or trust who's been lurking in the shadows for quite a few episodes at this point. And how we finally got some answers is because he decided to reveal himself. None of the main characters sought him out, no one could trust what he was saying, no one figured out what to do. Abel revealed himself, told them what was going on, and came up with the plan himself. Compare that to episode 8. Pomni uses what she learned in episode 3 to bring out Sane Kinger, who reveals himself because of her. They know and trust him not only because he's been right in the thick of it with the rest of the cast, but when he told them what was going on, characters like Ragatha could make connections on her own, like the butterfly from episode 6, proving that what he was saying was the truth. Kinger may have known what to do, but it was Pomni who used what she learned in episode 1 to concoct a plan to escape Kane. They use their experiences that we've witnessed all throughout the show, and they craft the solution themselves. I think for better or for worse, this contrast perfectly sums up why the storytelling structure of the Amazing Digital Circus is so important, and why, as the show comes to a close, it reveals one of the ultimate takeaways that fans need to leave the series with. There is one episode left, only days away. One last adventure for this cast of characters that we've fallen in love with over the course of the show. We may finally be able to put the mystery of the circus to rest, and say goodbye. But what if we don't get all the answers we were looking for? What if all this time searching doesn't reveal the secrets we were hoping for? How are we supposed to just abandon that? I don't know. But if I've learned anything from making this video, I've learned that maybe it's okay to not know something. You are watching one of the thousands of videos about this series, and I think we keep creating and watching for the same reason. Because much like the characters themselves, all these questions around the circus brought the fans together. The plot and mystery of this amazing digital show is a roundabout affirmation of why the unknown can be frustrating but natural, not just as storytelling, but life itself. The unknown is inherently human. By giving us less, we look for more in each other. So embrace it. Find your people, hold on to them, and make some good memories. Because a stagnant life without all the answers is still a life worth living together. And besides, good memories can do a lot.